Hello. Welcome to another edition of Shining Light on Shadows, a candid conversation about mental health. This is episode 32. Patricia Croom is our guest, and we are focusing on boundaries. The title for the episode, Strong Boundaries to Protect Yourself or Weak Boundaries. My name is Neil, and that's Dawn.
And we're sitting next to each other.
I am in Milwaukee this weekend for a conference. We'll tell you more about that later. But after 32 episodes, this is the first time I get to look Dawn directly in the face. It's good to see you, Dawn.
It's good to see you, Neil. I'm so glad that we got the opportunity to do this. And thanks to our friend Candice for giving us the space to be able to do it.
Absolutely.
Really appreciate that.
We are live on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, and my website. So please like, comment, share, retweet, do all the things you do on social media to let people know about the show. In particular, I want to thank everyone who's watching on replay. Thank you for taking the time to come back and watch it when it was convenient for you. One of the things that we try and keep in mind when we promote the show and produce the show is that we are focused on the content, on the issues that we're raising, on putting out a good product. And we trust that people will find it when they're ready to find it. And these are not necessarily time sensitive issues. They really are evergreen issues that you can watch at any point. So thank you for coming back and watching later. This episode, our 32nd episode, is going to focus on boundaries. And it's going to be a wide-ranging conversation because there's a lot to talk about. There are boundaries you erect that are strong boundaries, where you enforce that and kind of tell people what's what. There's sometimes you have weak boundaries and it's a little wishy-washy and even and I was speaking for myself, it's sometimes hard to say no to people, to friends, to work projects, etc. And then there's sometimes that there are no boundaries at all. Patricia wrote a blog post about this. She's going to tell us all about kind of her thoughts on boundaries as well. But before that, we want to introduce you to a very special friend of ours, someone that Dawn and I both know in Milwaukee. She had to get the nonverbal cue to come over. Candice Sanchez.
I'm in the house in the room.
Well, I don't know if you'd say Candice Sanchez is in the house because we're in Candice Sanchez's
house.
We're in Candice Sanchez's house. Thank you so much, first of all, for the minimal part of hosting, letting us do the show here, but letting me stay here for the weekend and taking me back and forth to the conference. Absolutely. I'm so glad that Dawn and I are going to be presenting at this conference, Paths to Healing, which is for survivors of sexual abuse in all of its forms. Dawn and I are going to be presenting about the podcast. Dawn's also going to be talking about her book, The Blue Flower Curtain. But Candice, can you tell us a little bit more about the conference? Just kind of your 30-second
so
overview?
The Paths to Healing, it was founded by a podcast guest of mine, Callan Hardy, back in 2013, and it stopped due to COVID and due to funding. So I'm bringing the conference back. When Callan hosted it, it was for just male survivors. And then he expanded it to men and women. And he only had it for like a day. But because Candice is such a visionary and I want to go big or go home, I said, why don't we do a whole weekend? Like, let's just make it a big, huge party. Because although healing is hard work, right? But if you do the work and we are all doing the work, it's a lifelong process. I felt compelled to do a weekend retreat, to sprinkle wellness, to do workshops, to do reflection. And so the three themes are relaxing, relax, restore, and reflect. Because with a healing journey, I with my own healing, I need this conference just as much as anybody else does. So, it's a lifelong process, but I feel that when we're together, like we are here together, we tend to understand one another. We build connection and we build community. So the conference is going to be amazing. It's really going to help meet the survivor where they are on their healing journey. We have a lot of great survivor-led presenters. Like I can't wait. We're going to have a photo voice project presentation through art, photography, and artwork to display our journeys of healing. We're going to have a dance party because music brings me joy. And I asked all of the attendees to send me their 3 jams, their 3 songs, and we're going to have a dance party. But I couldn't have done this without the planning committee, to the volunteers, to the presenters, to the people that are going to show up, the attendees, the survivors that are going to actually step into this space and receive this healing. And then on Sunday, because I have my faith, and Sunday we're going to do a in remembrance and honor of survivors that we've lost. Sometimes, we lose the ones that we love through, whether it's domestic violence, gun violence, suicide, mental health issues, substance abuse. I want to honor and recognize those individuals. So Sunday we'll have a moment of pause and reflection, sing some beautiful songs to honor and remember those names. So thanks for letting me share a little bit about what the weekend's going to be all about.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
And I wanted to make sure folks know that in terms of the Path to Healing conference, it is this weekend, and it has a number of great supporters. You'll see Unspoken Conversations with Candace, the podcast that Candace Sanchez hosted. You'll see The Blue Flower Curtain, Dawn's book. So Dawn is one of the sponsors. You'll see the Digimentors logo as well. Digimentors provides pro bono support to produce this podcast. It supported the podcast that Candace did, season 3. This is how we got together. And I'm proud that they're supporting the conference as well. I wanted to make sure folks know, in case you didn't know the story, and we'll get to your comments in just a moment, but Dawn and Candace know each other from Milwaukee. Dawn invited me to speak on a panel of male survivors of sexual assault. Candace heard me speak, and after my comments, said that she was going to dedicate season 3 of her podcast to male survivors of sexual assault. Asked me if I'd be a guest. I said yes.
And
can I produce the show?
And
12 months later, when I decided to do a show on mental health, I turned to my friend Dawn and asked her if she'd be a guest.
I said
yes.
And
she is my co-host. So this is, the fact that the 3 of us can be together is really important and special. I want to say hi to
a full circle moment.
Definitely a full circle. So stay here for one moment, Candace.
Absolutely.
We say hello to Jim Newberg, who's saying hello. Now, usually Dawn can point to where Jim is, but she can't do that this time.
But hey, read what he says.
He says hello from Milwaukee.
Go Brewers.
Go away.
Go Brewers.
We'll just let that slide. My mom is saying hi from Hastings on Hudson.
Hi, Mom.
Mom, thank you for watching always.
Love our moms.
Appreciate it. And we always say that. We love our moms. And Dawn, I know that this was 5 years for you.
Mm-hmm.
Just
it was in April.
It was April.
Yeah,
you did a Memorial
we
Day
did
last weekend,
yeah,
right?
Memorial last weekend.
So thinking of you
Thank you.
with that as well. And Kate is watching, and saying hello, welcome to Milwaukee. Now, Kate, Dawn can usually say Kate is, but not so much. Paula is watching from Tallahassee, Florida. Thank you, Paula. She is a colleague of mine at Digimentors. My sister is watching from Bellevue, Washington. Hey, Amy. And she said, "Is that Candace?" Yes, that is Candace Sanchez.
It's me in the flesh.
And she says hi.
Hi.
Paula says the conference sounds like such a huge support, and it is. We're definitely looking forward to it. My mom says hi to Ms. Sanchez, Dawn and Neil. Alexis, Randa is here. Alexis, thank you so much for joining us. And yes, it's a nice healing conference. We also have someone watching on LinkedIn, and I want to just do a little quick research to figure out who that is because their name is not showing up in LinkedIn. That's Patricia is watching. Patricia is another colleague from Digimentors. She says, so very glad there are now so many great resources. Yes. Absolutely. So thank you everyone for watching. We have a great show planned. Don, can you read what the ticker says at the bottom?
I was just curious where the Yankees are in terms of are they like
they're doing
one are they one game away from
I'm a Brewers fan too, so
or,
Don, I got your back, girl.
I'm just saying 27 World Championships.
I'm just curious
27.
in this particular season where they're exactly.
They're in first place. That's all I know.
I love it.
Right? They didn't fall out of first place. I haven't checked in a while. We have other things, boundaries. We have boundaries that we need to talk about.
I'll excuse myself. Thank you.
Thank you, Candice.
you
Thank you so much
so
for joining us. That was Candice Sanchez, a close friend of ours. But now we want to turn our attention to boundaries. And it is a very important topic. It's something that is so important for mental health. And it's such a huge challenge for people, regardless of your situation. Our guest today, Patricia Croom, wrote a blog post. She originally wrote it on her website. She graciously allowed us to republish it and focus our episode around it. The headline, "Setting and Respecting Boundaries Can Be a Game Changer. Setting clear boundaries with consequences can be difficult. Having hard conversations can be difficult. Failing to have them creates resentment, hurt feelings, and relationships that fall apart." That's just a snippet of what she wrote about, but we'd like to welcome Patricia to the show. Patricia.
Hi, Patricia.
Hi, Neil. Hi, Dawn. Thank you so much for having me.
We're so glad you're here.
Thank you. And thank you for that extended intro with Candice. As you can see, that was a special moment to be in her house and to have her in person. It's this is really, and we were talking before the show, we've produced 32 shows, and before we went live, I'm still fumbling around a little bit because wait, what am I supposed to do? Which button do I press? Because I'm out of my element. Folks who have watched the show usually know that I almost never leave my office, and I have my pictures of Maui behind me, which I do need to swap out with newer pictures. But when you're out of your element, it throws things off a little bit. But we want to focus on boundaries. When you started your website, you've written a number of different blog posts. Why was boundaries one of the topics you chose to write about? Why did you think it was so important?
For myself, so often the things that I write about, I think, affect me deeply, or I find that I struggle with. And so boundaries is one of those things that comes up frequently. I'm an HR director. I have to deal with boundaries at work and talk to people about boundaries. And I have 4 children and I have lots of grandchildren. And so those boundaries come up, and they are something that all of us struggle with and try to put in place. And gosh, sometimes we don't have strong ones in certain spaces, and we really are great in some spaces, and then we struggle so much in others. And so it's just a constant piece. And as I've gone through my healing journey, it's one of the things that has been very important to me to really dig into, to look at my own boundaries, to look at how I face other people's boundaries and respect those boundaries, even when I don't understand them. Because sometimes it doesn't always make sense to us. And I talked about that in the blog with a situation between my sister and I. But those are just my personal experiences. And then in conversations day to day, you you get to see that in action when people have those boundaries, don't have those boundaries. So it's just a constant topic. And so it felt like it was at that moment, it felt like the right thing to write about. And I feel like we revisit it frequently in conversation.
Yeah. So can you talk a little bit about why do you think that survivors of trauma have these boundary issues? Because when we were talking but in our prep show, like Neil and I both were like, oh yeah. And everybody I've talked to about the show has had some of those same feelings. So can you talk a little bit about why you think that is?
Absolutely. I think that for especially survivors of trauma, often our own boundaries were kind of crashed through. We didn't have a say in things that happened to us. And each person is so different. So the way that we kind of move forward from that can be that we have extremely strong boundaries. We're in control of every situation, or we attempt to control every situation. Or we have very weak boundaries because we may struggle to feel like our boundaries are going to be respected. So why have them, or a multitude of reasons. But I think that the lack of strong boundaries or autonomy to our boundaries by others as survivors often creates that struggle.
Absolutely. I'll say, and one of the things that I was challenged with over the last several days, I had a lot of thoughts about boundaries and some of the challenges I've had, but didn't make the time to write a blog post. But to your point, where you just mentioned, I remember for the longest time that I consciously thought about not having boundaries. I mentioned it briefly in the opening, but for folks who have watched the show before and know the story, and I kind of try and ease into it for folks who may not know, to give a little bit of a warning, a little bit of a kind of trigger warning. I was abused by a neighbor when I was 7 years old. I was sexually abused. And I remember very specifically thinking in high school that if I didn't try and enforce a boundary, if I just let people do whatever they wanted, then it wouldn't hurt, because they didn't violate a boundary. They didn't cross that threshold. I let them in. So it was on me, not them. And it's hard to explain that sometimes to folks, but you really get it, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, I think I went the opposite direction in high school because I was abused from about 5 years old until I was 13. And so when we moved and I was in high school, I set lots of boundaries. I had to control every situation, because then if anything happened, it was because I allowed it. So I went in the opposite direction, but both paths make perfect sense to me.
Dawn, what about you? Where are you with boundaries?
So I fall on both ends of the spectrum. But I would say that the majority of my life is a control, we'll call it control freak. I have to control every aspect of my life. And when I am not in control of what's going on, it wreaks havoc on me. And when we had this discussion in our prep call, I was like really reflecting on how much of that is true. And in my blog, I talk about, I used to get on my ex-husband all the time for like not helping me with this or not paying attention to this or not doing this. And he would say, well, when I ask you if you need help, you say, I got this. And my expectation was he should just know, right? He should just come back and know that I don't mean I got this. Like, I need help. I want help. And that's just not the case, right? He can't read my mind. And so like, even my husband knows that, like, if we're going to go somewhere or do something, like, he calls it a tentative plan, because I have to have a plan of some sort, right? I can't just like go by the seat of my pants. It's just, I have to have a plan of some sort. But in my blog, I also write about how when it comes to my children and the people that I'm like really, really close to, then I have no boundaries. Then I don't know how to say no. I don't know, like, I'll drop anything. I'll do anything. I'll stop what I'm doing to just go ahead and take care of whatever needs to be taken care of. So there's like no middle ground for me. And I'm like recognizing, as I was reflecting this, that that's not a really great, healthy way of like coping with things. Like, there has to be some type of middle ground. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, Patty?
Sure. It's such a hard thing to, I think, get to that middle ground. And I feel like for myself and for others, it feels like you'll get really good at setting appropriate boundaries and somewhere in between full control of everything and no control in one area, but the struggle is still there in other areas. And there is a middle ground, right? Somewhere between like vice and virtue, where you're able to recognize, like, this is something I should or can control. And this is something that this is not within my scope of control. And so this is what I'm willing to accept. And then I will create appropriate boundaries and step away or do what I need to do. But it's hard to get to that middle ground. And I think for anyone, it's difficult, but I think for survivors, there's an added layer to that, because there's always another piece on your healing journey that you kind of peel away, or something triggers, and then you recognize that this is a place where your boundaries are not healthy. And so you need to work on that space and that area, and find that middle ground again. So.
Yeah. It's tricky, right? It's really tricky. One of the things that you talked about in your blog was crossing boundaries. Can you talk a little bit, like, unintentionally crossing boundaries? And that really resonated with me too, because I think that I see that happen a lot. I see that with myself too, where somebody puts up a boundary and, unintentionally, I just like walk right past that boundary and do or say something I shouldn't do.
I think we're all guilty of it at times. And for me, that's something I've tried to be very, very cognizant of in the last few years for the people that are around me. And I talk in my blog about my situation with my sister. I crossed a boundary for her, and I didn't know that it was a boundary. But as I reflected back on it, I realized I could have shown up better. I could have been more cognizant of the things going on with her that were affecting how she was feeling with how I was showing up. And she put a very strong boundary in place that she did not want to talk to me for a while. And that was very hurtful. And I also didn't fully agree with it. I'm like, it wasn't that serious. It didn't feel that serious. And at the same time, she did not want to speak to me. We were not speaking for quite some time. And other people would try to give me information, and I had to tell them, like, hey, her boundary is that she does not want to speak to me, which probably means she also doesn't want you telling me about what's going on in her life. So if she would like to reach out to me, that's fine. But until then, I need you to respect her boundary because I'm trying to respect her boundaries. And when we began talking again and really healing the damage that had been done, she said that that was one of the things people would tell her, that even my mom would, tell her, like, Patty said this thing about respecting your boundaries and whatever that means. And my sister said that really made her feel that she was respected a lot by me, even though we were not in a good space in our relationship, that I respected that boundary for her and that I stuck to it very strongly, trying to respect it. And that probably actually led to us healing our relationship quicker. So I think that we all do it. I think recognizing it, apologizing for it. I don't think that we always have to understand somebody else's boundary to still try to respect it, and to pull back when we realize we've crossed it and say, oh my goodness, it seems that I've crossed a boundary with you. And I want to apologize. I didn't realize that was a boundary for you, or I didn't realize I was crossing that. So, but those are hard things. And I think that as you practice it, you get better at it too.
So I just have one follow-up on that, because you kind of gave some tips on if you yourself cross a boundary. But what do you do when someone like crosses your boundaries and you kind of like point it out to them and they like continue to do that? Do you have any suggestions or recommendations on kind of how to approach that?
So there's a few things. Sometimes it may mean that the relationship is fully broken and you need to step back from that relationship. But in many cases, I think that it can be talked about and discussed. As you know, politics is a big conversation these days, and can be one that creates a lot of stress and turmoil. And there are people who love to talk about it and love to ramp others up. And so even saying, hey, if you're going to come over to visit this weekend, because sometimes that's within families, right? Like that's where that conversation happens a lot, or friend groups. I'd love for you to come over. We can't talk about politics. If you talk about politics, I'm going to ask you to leave, because it really is not a comfortable subject for me. And that's my boundary. And then you have to stick to asking them to leave if they start going there. But those pieces of teaching people what your boundary is, and the clear if this, then this, I think creates a healthy boundary and the tool that you need to hold your boundary in those situations that are difficult.
So I want to go ahead and bring in a comment from Jay Mo saying, "You go, girl." Patty, can you tell us who Jay is?
Sure. So Jay is one of my son's friends. He is basically like another member of our family. He's in our family group chat. He is an amazing young man, and we just absolutely love him. So he's part of our Christmas celebrations and our birthday celebrations and everything. So
That's
yeah,
great.
Thanks for watching,
Nice
Jay.
He's watching. That's great. That's great.
I'll say one of the things that when we started the show, the main goal was to try and lower the stigma around mental health, to talk about these issues out loud in public. Something that I was reluctant to do myself. I had never used the words anxiety and depression, said them out loud. I'd never told anyone that I saw a therapist, for example. I was too embarrassed about that. We're really, in terms of the range of topics we've covered and the guests, most of them have been people who have gone through their own challenges, are on their own journey, talking about their own experience with mental health. We have had a few providers, coaches, advocates, etc. but I want to say how important it is that you're modeling this kind of behavior, talking about mental health, writing about it, and the fact that Jay is watching shows how your influence spreads. That it's normalizing that conversation around mental health, and that couldn't be more important in this day and age. So kudos to you on that. I did want to point out another connection that the three of us have. We actually first connected with each other last fall after Dawn and I did a presentation for United Way Next, which is the alumni organization for United Way staffers. Dawn, of course, still works with United Way of Greater Milwaukee and Waukesha County. Almost hesitated on that, but I still remember. And I worked with United Way of Snohomish County in Washington State and United Way Worldwide. Patricia, you're on the board for United Way in DeKalb County, Illinois. Kishwaukee?
Correct.
United Way?
Yes.
Did I get it right?
Well done.
But it really is, it's something that we feel very strongly about. And in fact, last fall, we had a guest on the show from United Way of Northwestern Vermont, Steve Rebecco, who actually I also know from high school and college. So that's all sorts of circles that we're combining there. But he runs their mental health advocacy program in Vermont. So that episode, we were lifting up the work they were doing and the work that the United Way here in Milwaukee does around mental health. So I want to thank you for your work as a volunteer, as a board member for your local United Way.
Absolutely. And thank you guys for what you do as well, because the conversation, whether it's United Way or advocating for mental health issues and talking openly about them is so, so important. And the connections that we make, sometimes you help one person or your story resonates with somebody and it creates a connection that then leads to even more connections and more healing and more opportunities to speak your truths and for other people to find that space as well.
So Patty, was that circumstance with your sister that sort of caused you to take pause and start thinking about boundaries and kind of doing some work and some reflection on that? Or was there something else that prompted you?
It actually wasn't that. I think that if that had been the catalyst, it would have been far after. And so I probably wouldn't have respected her boundary to not, hear what my siblings were telling me or somebody else was trying to tell me about her. As I have continued through my healing journey, I wrote my book, and I realized even as I was writing my book that so many times my boundaries were not healthy boundaries. Mm-hmm. And so it just became the topic that for me was something that was necessary to look at, something that was necessary to work on and to really focus on, so that I could show up in a more healthy manner for the people around me, whether that was respecting their boundaries or setting mine very intentionally and working towards just being clear and being clear with expectations and finding a way to just show up better. I think that's always, for me, it's what's the next piece that I need to work on for myself to show up better for the people around me and be an example.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Did you, if I can ask, did you work with like a therapist to help you? Did you like read some books? Like what was the way in which you started to identify what good boundaries were?
All of the above.
Mm-hmm.
Therapy for sure. I went to a retreat for adult survivors, female survivors of childhood sexual abuse. So that was a big conversation piece because it is something that often survivors struggle with. And so it was all of those pieces. And then I also at work had a coach who told me that he started working with me and told me that sometimes my edges were a little rough, and that sometimes my need to be right overshadowed my approach, which often was because I was just bursting through boundaries that other people had and things that they expected. Uh, and so I had to start working on myself to show up better, to better advocate for our staff and for our company and all of those spaces as well.
You work in HR, right?
I do.
Can you talk a little bit? I mean, that you're talking about your own journey and the work that you had to do personally. What about boundaries at work? That's something that I think about a lot. It's a challenge for me. One of our recent episodes, I talked about a recent diagnosis of adult ADHD, and I have just a really difficult time drawing boundaries um, for myself around work, about around not doing more work, and it's not just a question of someone asking me to do something or pushing me to do something. Like I tell clients all the time, you almost never are going to have to push me to do something. You're going to have to rein me in. You're going to have to hold me back. I'm always pushing to do more. I'm my own worst enemy in that way. I don't draw boundaries for myself, much less, incoming requests. Um, how does that play out in the work world for you?
I am often reminding, especially our management, our leadership team, that they get to take breaks too. I see that a lot in our leadership team where they continue to take on projects and they want to help. I think most of the people that I work with are servant leaders. And so they always want to help someone else. And how can I help you, while their calendars are so full that sometimes I'm still getting emails at 8 o'clock at night from them. And so reminding them that it's okay for them to take breaks and okay for them to say no and okay for them to clear their calendar, okay to take a day off. And we see it with staff too, often trying to prove themselves and taking on so much that things slip through, which creates the opposite outcome that they want. They want to be taken seriously. They want to do a good job. They want to prove that they care and they're great at what they do. But because they don't have a good boundary with saying, I'm already working on this project, and I can have that done by this date, and then I could help with that if you still need help at that point, that is a struggle. And so often it's coaching someone through how to better advocate for themselves. And sometimes in a meeting, if somebody's offering to help, I'll try to kind of throw something in like, oh, aren't you working on that project? Do you have time for that? So, sometimes we need a little support while we're trying to set a good boundary in the workplace, and having somebody that can maybe remind you or be your accountability partner with that, and remind you of all the things that you have to do. But we see it in the workplace all the time, and just try to continue to support people. And it's a habit that people have. I don't want to say that it's a habit necessarily, but it's the way that they go about it, and it's very ingrained in them to continue to do that. So trying to remind them gently to set boundaries, and it's just an important piece so that they can successfully show up and not burn out too.
With Zoom and other, really Zoom in particular, but there are all these services that will join a meeting for you to take notes and send a summary and all that. Are you able to do that for me? Could you join my meetings to tell people that I have too much? I mean, this is really, I make light of it, but this is, a constant struggle. It's a constant issue because to a certain extent, if it's not even if there's a question about, okay, who can do X, right? recently, I had a few examples where working on a project with someone, and I knew, like, we're working on a joint project, and there's a part that they just weren't able to do. I wasn't expecting to do work on the project. I thought my part was done, and I said, okay, I'll write that part. And then like 5 minutes later, okay, I'll write that part too. And like as the words are coming out, I'm like, man, what the? I can't do it. I don't have time for this. I'm going to be staying up all night again. I'm going to be, and in fact, after this show, Candice, Dawn, and I are planning to go out for dinner, which is nice. We've never done that before. But then I'm going to be working on a presentation into the wee hours because it's due tomorrow and we have to get it done. But if I don't say that, or if I don't offer to do something when I'm talking with a client, they probably won't like me. And that's not fun.
Right. I started doing this. This was something that was shared with me by a therapist, actually. I started putting a stop sign on a Post-it note, and I would put it on my notepad as I went into meetings. And it was a stop sign. That was all that it was, but it was enough of a reminder for me to stop before I started offering to do something or started responding to something with an emotional response, to just stop and take a few breaths. And then I started adding to that. Is there someone else that could help? How can we work this out together? I can't take on another project, but how could we support this still getting done? And so for me, that was something that I had to do, and then start kind of layering some additional pieces onto it. But creating that stop sign that gave me that few seconds to remember to stop before I opened my mouth and said, oh, I can do that. That was an important piece for me.
And I will say that I have actually been able to do that in a few circumstances. I have actually said I can't do something. I don't have capacity. Here are all the projects I'm working on now. Like you got to find someone else. Even as I describe the work, and I know that, okay, I may be the right person to do it, or I may be the best person to do it, I can't. So someone else is going to have to do it. It's going to have to take longer. It may not be as good. It's just not possible. So, but to me, it's almost like an 80-20. 20% of the time, maybe I'm able to establish that boundary. I'm going to pull in a comment and then turn to Dawn to see if she has anything to add on this, but it's a little bit uncanny, and I'll share for folks who, are not familiar with the show. My mom is a very loyal viewer. She watches every episode, and every now and then she hits the nail on the head, and it's, she's my mom. She knows me. She's known me for 51 years. To set up boundaries requires a lot of confidence, self-respect, and not having a pleasing personality. Sometimes people want to look nice in front of others. That's exactly what it is. That's the whole enchilada right there. It's not that I don't have self-confidence or self-respect. It's really more the that people-pleasing personality. I not even that. Like, I can't. If somebody is working on something and I know I can help them, I know that I could do it for them, I almost can't fathom letting them struggle through it. It's hard to not step in.
Yeah, I don't have that problem.
And that's why Dawn is so empathetic and so supportive of the various challenges I go through in my day-to-day life. It's not a problem for me.
No. So I hear what you're saying, and I have this problem with my children. I really do. Like, I want my children to like me, right? So
Well,
I want them to know that, I'm there for them through every circumstance, that I would, do anything for them. But I think what I've learned as my children have become adults is that um, I don't have to do that for them to like me.
now,
I'm a likable person. You are a likable person, and you have a likable personality. So therefore, I think I get that drive, that need to like be a people pleaser. I can't turn that off. It's really difficult for me to do that when it comes to my kids. When it comes to my job, I my husband will tell you that I have two valves. And you're gonna pardon my language here, but he actually got me a coffee mug that says business bitch, because when I go into like business mode, like I'm in business mode, and there are things that I have the capacity to do, and there are things that I don't have the capacity to do. There are things that my team can take on, and there are things that I have to tell them, you need to pull back. That's you're gonna burn yourself out. You're gonna wear yourself out. Um, that's one mode, and the other mode is, what you want me to go to, Johnson's Creek, which is 45 minutes away, to pick you up a cup of coffee? Yep, I will absolutely do that for you. I can do it in a heartbeat. So there are those two kind of juxtapositions. So I get what you're saying about the and then if I don't go all the way out to Johnson's Creek to get that special cup of coffee, I will feel horrible. I
think the challenge is that, and Patty, I'm curious what you think of this, is that when you are in that environment and you are, generally stepping in and helping, if you do find religion, if you do find help and guidance and try to establish a boundary, that actually throws people for a loop, and then they get like whiplash, like, oh, this is not, we weren't expecting this, this is not who you usually are, and there's almost like a backlash to that, like a backlash to being healthy, which is a different challenge.
Yeah, talk about that, Patty.
I I think that we teach people how to treat us, and when people know that we are helpful and we want to come through for them, and I don't even think that it's always a conscious thing on their part, to be clear. I don't think that can you go pick me up a cup of coffee 45 minutes away? I don't think that that's meant to be anything but, hey, I'm calling this person who I love, and I think that they're gonna come do that for me, and I get to see them, and that's our connection, and that's our peace. So it can feel hurtful when somebody sets a boundary for someone who's not used to that person setting a boundary. But we teach people how to treat us or how to expect us to show up. And so as much as we can retrain our own brains to set healthy boundaries, to show up better, we can also help retrain their brains too on what to expect. And so I think that most people want to show up well. And so when they realize that, oh, this person just told me no, and I feel some kind of way because they've never told me no before, they will be able to take a moment. It may take a moment, right? They may feel hurt for a moment or whatever, but they will start realizing that you're showing up and setting boundaries for yourself to protect yourself and your mental health. And I think that most people start to realize that and respect it. And I think that once you get to that place and you start practicing it, with setting those good boundaries, you create the space for other people to respect it. And it creates a new playbook for everybody.
I do want to go back to a point that Dawn was talking about, though, in terms of her kids, because I think it's significant. The blog post she wrote, which I shared earlier in the comments, and the pull quote, being in control is necessary for me because of the very little control I had in my life until I was about 25. She didn't mention it in the blog post, but for folks who have watched the show before, you know Dawn's story of being violently attacked and raped at 21. And that talk about not having control. But she said the one area where I'm a pushover is with my kids. I don't know how to say no to them. They're, her kids are older. My daughter is 12. Patty, you have kids?
I do. My oldest is 33 and my youngest are twins who are about to be 25.
Okay. So I think that's actually a really interesting area of discussion in terms of boundaries with your kids, that, to a certain extent, there's nothing you wouldn't do for your children, kind of writ large. But parenting is a whole process of setting boundaries, not so much necessarily for yourself, sometimes for yourself, but really setting boundaries for them, so they understand how to make their way through the world. But I'm thinking even more specifically, like when kids are 2 and younger, sleep training is a whole process of setting boundaries. I still remember the pediatrician saying, you're not going to want to have your daughter sleep with you in the bed when she's 7 years old. Now, we went through sleep training, and it's I don't know what everyone's experience with that was, but some of that was really hard. Sitting in the nursery, them crying in the crib, and just letting them be. I will say, though, that we are more than happy when our 12-year-old comes in the bed. We let her sleep with us on Friday and Saturday nights. I mean, those days are going to end pretty soon. So I'm going to take every last chance we can. But that's a really great example. As they get older, I mean, what wouldn't you do? It's one thing if a colleague asks you to get coffee from 45 minutes away. Okay, I don't know that I'd get my daughter coffee from 45 minutes away, even if she was older, but there's almost, what wouldn't you do?
Yeah, I would. That's true. I would do anything for anything that they asked. Right. I would do. And I set so many boundaries for my children that it was ridiculous. Well, like, I was a helicopter parent. I absolutely did not give them a lot of opportunities that they absolutely should have been able to have, because I was so overly protective of them.
Yeah, we've talked about that, though, on the show, in terms of, when someone has gone through the kind of trauma that you have, Dawn, that's a completely normal response. And I know I've mentioned that, for my, my immediate family, but my wife, Pam's family, she had a brother who passed away from SIDS when she was 3 years old. And when Pam was in high school, she never understood why her parents wouldn't let her, go to Boston with her friends. She was in Connecticut. The restrictions they put on her, for her, she seemed onerous. And then as she grew up and learned more about kind of the family stories and other experiences her mom had, it made sense. And that's why they didn't let me do anything. It's you really clamp down.
But there's also, I think, healthy ways to raise children and unhealthy ways to raise children when it comes to boundaries. Sure. And you don't, there's no manual. I don't care how many books are out there. Parenting is a very unique experience. And Some things you're going to get wrong. And I think both of my kids are amazing, wonderful human beings. So I had to have done something right. But they will talk about not being able to go to sleepovers and not being able to go into their friends' houses unless they were together, and things like that I was really adamant about, and they lacked those experiences because of that.
Yeah, I still struggle with those boundaries with my kids, and I will drop everything and do things. So,
You get it.
so there's always room for growth, and there's always the things that we're going to struggle with. And I think too, giving ourselves grace when we just know that it's something that we're not going to be able to change. So,
Yep, absolutely.
I want to make a programming note for folks just so they know. As we do the show live 2 times a month, the second and fourth Thursdays of the month. But I am drawing a boundary around my vacation next week, July 3rd through 13th. I'm actually going to be seeing my sister and mom up in New York, and we will not be doing a show July 10th. Our next show will be July 24th. So it'll be several weeks till we come back. And I'll say that, in that same vein, I'm here in Milwaukee this weekend. I do another show on Sunday mornings, and I executive produce that show and an occasional guest host. It's Cerie's Sunday New York Times read along for folks who are familiar with the show. We're not doing a show this weekend, even though there was a way that I could make it happen, and I've done it before when I've traveled. I'm staying at Candace's house this weekend, but in order to do the show this Sunday, I would have gone to a hotel Saturday night. I usually wake up at 6 a.m. Sundays to start prepping the show that goes live at 8:30. It would have been an hour earlier because I'm in the Central Time Zone, and then I would have had to take a Uber to the conference and get to the conference late. There was just so much around that. It was possible, but I actually said no, and that's a big deal for me. I'm going to take this Sunday, next Sunday for 4th of July, and the Sunday after, last Sunday of my vacation, off. So there is some hope, I guess, but it's not easy. It's definitely not easy.
All right, we're coming up to our time, Neil.
Yeah.
That's crazy. The show went really, really fast today. I think it's a very strong topic for both of us. I don't think we knew how strong of a topic it was until we had our prep call.
Before we go, Patty, I just want to briefly, you have a website, and we'll show the website real quick. And you've written several blog posts. You also have a book that you wrote recently. What is your background? You're author, advocate, speaker, social worker, as you say on your website. You do have training in this area?
I do. I have my bachelor's in social work, so I'm not a clinical social worker at all, but I've been certified in coaching, and I've done a lot of advocacy. I speak about different topics, a lot surrounding childhood sexual abuse and really getting to the other side and healing and thriving. So that's kind of where it's at, and that's my background.
And what's your name of your book?
The name of my book is When Will She Be Better?
Stories and poems about a journey through childhood, sexual, physical, and mental abuse, and coming out on the other side. That's your memoir.
It is.
I see a return engagement for Patty to talk about her book, Dawn. What do you think?
Too. Yeah, absolutely.
We were so focused on boundaries and kind of that larger topic. If you're open to the idea, Patty, it might be great to have you as a return guest.
I would love that.
We don't say that to everyone.
No,
Just so
we
you
do
know.
not.
Just so
Well,
you
thank
know.
you. I feel honored, and I would love that.
And here is her blog page. Several great posts that she has. Again, this has been Shining Light on Shadows, a candid conversation about mental health. Our guest has been Patty Croom, and we focused on boundaries for this conversation. Wanted to bring in Jim Newberg saying, "Great job, Patty. See you this weekend, Neil and Candace. Love you, Dawn." He's also going to see Dawn a few times this weekend as well,
Yes.
I presume. And let's see, a couple other comments that came in. I think my sister said that she was proud of me for saying no on doing some of the shows. I'll be able to spend a little bit more time next week when I'm in New York with family, which is good. If you do want to be added to our mailing list, please send me an email, neil@digimentors.group, neil@digimentors.group, and we will add you to our notifications for each show. Again, thank you for joining us, and we will see you in about a month for our next show. Take care.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.